So let's show some money moves. Different kind of money move segment today. Bob Nightingale putting this tweet out, and I'll also give you some more context from Ken Rosenthal about playoff share money. So the Rangers championship share, 61 full shares, was a little over $500,000 per person. The Diamondbacks NL pennant share, they gave out 71 full shares, was a little over $300K. Both teams were generous, knowing this is life-changing money for the tireless clubhouse employees and support staff. And if you're unaware of how this works, it comes out after the World Series. They figure out what the money is from the gates, from the playoffs, not for the games, only for the games that you're guaranteed.
Only the first 4 games.
First 4 games in a 7-gamer, first 3. In the wild card, it's the first 2, if that makes sense, because you can't pay people based off games that are later on in a series, because then it could alter the integrity of the game, because people would be like, let's play a longer series so we make more money, because someone has asked that before. They're like, they should pay him for game 6 and 7. I'm like, no, I'm against that part. That does not make sense.
You know who gets that money, though?
League owners, teams. Let's go.
Rob
yes.
Manfred.
But anyway, this is an important thing. It gets talked about in baseball a lot. And obviously on this show, we can really dive in. Just one more thing before we do that, because Ken Rosenthal wrote quite a bit about it as well. And I thought he had some interesting points about Evan Longoria being on the Diamondbacks. And he was one of the guys leading the charge in the meeting, being like, listen, we can change people's lives. Apparently, you know who was one of the best back in the day? Ricky Henderson would tell guys for his playoff teams in the clubhouse, like, screw that. It's like, you give it to, this guy and change his life. Like, the players that are on the team for the year, they get the playoff shares. They're in, right?
It's
the conversations that occur.
If you're on the roster for a certain amount of time, you automatically get a full share. So that's the people get a full share. Even if you're injured, you're on the roster. It's so hard, though, in these meetings, because you forget people, and there's so many people that help you during a year, and then you feel terrible. And I've said in these meetings get heated, because there are people that are like, oh, let's give Scott Braun a full share, and then there's somebody else like, what the fuck did Scott Braun, what did he do? And then you get players arguing over who should get what, and you can give cash grants, you can give half shares, you can give quarter shares, you can give eighth of a share, you can give $500, you can give, it's one of the best worst meetings as a player, when you get like, oh, we're gonna have a shares meeting when you're in the playoffs, and everyone's like, oh no, because it always leads to some infighting, and then you forget somebody.
And these meetings happen when? Before the playoffs.
They happen
right
2 to 3 days before the season ends.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're a team that like you have like a 10, like you're the Braves this year, like, okay, we're making the playoffs, guys.
Yeah,
because all the teams that make the playoffs get a share. It just slowly goes down. It's not just the World Series teams. So, but you get that, you have your guy come in, whoever, like your main clubhouse guy is, and you're like, okay, shares meeting, and you're like, oh gosh, what? And then you're like, okay, it could be, because it's great. You're like, oh, I'm going to get extra money, and these people are going to get money. But then you're like, okay, we have 12 clubhouse guys, right? And say, random number, 12, 10, let's say 10. And you're like, okay, do we give all 10 of these guys full shares? Do we only give the guys that travel a full share? Because you can also say, like, hey, there's five guys that work on the home side and 5 guys that work on the visiting side. You can be like, all right, we'll give our head guy one. And then you're like, why am I giving the visiting clubhouse guy a full share? He's helping the other team. And then you got guys that argue. It's just, and every team is different, and every team has their guys who stand up and say whatever. But gosh, it is a tough meeting.
I've seen so many sides of it, and the whole time you're talking, I'm like, oh man, I remember when this, oh man, and then that happened. Oh shoot, I can't, like, we had a guy one time, and I'm really going to be vague so I don't put the team out there, because like this tweet said, it is life-changing money. It was life-changing money for me, because every year I'm on the minimum contract, maybe a little bit extra, later on in my career. You make the playoffs. This is 6 figures for a month of playing. Now, guys who are making $10, $12, $15 million a year, they're like, it's not that much, but it's some cool chump change that I'm going to buy a Lamborghini with if we win, like stuff like that. So it is life-changing money. And seeing people react, seeing people come up to us in spring training, seeing people text videos like saying thank you so much for voting me a share. I had no idea you guys were going to vote me a half a share. I just got $100,000 for I know you guys lost the World Series. I wanted to win the World Series bad, but they just got $100,000. That's life-changing money. And when these meetings happen, I've seen meetings where they're like, no, unless you have dirt in your cleats, you're not getting jack. And to me, that's hurtful because I was constantly like, yes, I'm still getting a full share, so it's not on me, but it's the people that are your support staff that you need to take care of. If you don't, you're so arrogant to think that you did this all on your own. And it also brings up in my mind, there was a team that I played for, and they had, a lot of teams have them, the guy who finds tips for hitters, for pitchers. And so hitters were like, dude, this guy's awesome. This guy and this guy really help with this. Full share. A pitcher stood up, a relief pitcher stood up and goes, who the heck is that? They're like, oh, the guy that's over there he's always in that place. And they're like, I never knew who he was. He never says anything to me. So you go a whole season. A guy was on the team the whole season, and he doesn't know who this support staff is. Like, he's like, I don't want to give him a half a share. Like, what about if it's a pitcher? What about the bullpen catcher? He should get a full share. Like, okay, well, he's already getting a full share. Well, what about the massage therapist? And then somebody's like, I don't use a massage therapist. Why would I want to give up? So the greed really, really pisses me off. But you also can't sit here and go, oh, well, the Rangers must have been more greedy than the Diamondbacks because they only gave 61 and the Diamondbacks gave 71. That's not how it works.
No,
some teams have different staff and everything.
Yeah,
and that's my last point.
People do different things. I remember in 05, we forgot our advanced scout. And so we come to spring training, and we're like,
"You forgot." Man, that makes my hands
there's
sweat.
so
you
many.
Told me that.
So you're literally okay. So it was Canerco when we did it in 05, and Canerco calls the meeting. We're all in there, and you literally get a list of the players who were full shared, and then you write in names of people that should get them, and you start writing, and then you get down to you're 70 people in. You're always going to forget somebody. So
security guard.
Yeah. So our advanced scout, we come to spring training, and he's like, man, I didn't get a share from you guys. So we literally, a bunch of us wrote checks to him. And 10 of us got together and wrote him a check. I mean, it didn't equate to a full share, but we all were like, hey, let's chip in a certain amount and got him, a nice, hey, here's a nice, sorry, we fucked up. We fucked this one up. I'm sorry. Here.
That's great.
We handed him an envelope full of, here's, whatever, I forget, I don't even remember what the number was, but here's checks, go. Sorry, we messed up. And he was so happy. Awesome. But, there's always a thing where you
try not to.
But you can't. There's so many people. Many people that do so many things. You just can't always remember everybody, and it sucks.
Okay, ready? I'm going to blow your mind. So you're telling me that the biggest time of the year, playoff time, is coming up, and you're forcing a bunch of players into a room to get in heated debates right when you want your flow and your chemistry. Hold up to be at its finest. You are debating about how much money should go to team employees. They're not union members, team employees. This smells to me like something that should be done on the team side and figured out. This is your job. This is what you get in a playoff share. That goes in your contract, or I know they don't do that with a lot of people now. Why is this on the players?
Because this is the players' share of the pot.
Okay.
So what they do is they take the revenue from the first 4 games and they split it, and that goes into the 7-game series, and it goes into a pot, and they split it. And this is the players' shares because the players don't get paid in the postseason.
I understand.
This is basically your paycheck for the postseason.
But it's not as if we found this on some ancient grounds. This is how it must be done.
Yeah, but we don't. The players don't want the team picking who gets the money. You see what I'm saying? Because let's say you have a guy. Let's say you have a September call-up guy that's there for. There's a guy that was there for a week. If someone gets hurt and he comes up for a relief pitcher for a week.
The Diamondbacks just did this. Anyone that was on the playoff roster, even if they were barely
if you're on the playoff
team,
roster, you automatically
Jarvis
always get a full share.
Jordan Lawler, guys that barely played.
They usually do it quarter share, quarter share, quarter share. So the farther you make it.
Okay.
So Jordan Lawler would have gotten a quarter share for the time he was in the big leagues for the regular season. Then he gets a quarter share for being on the wild card roster. Another quarter share for being on the NLDS.
Right.
And then
it
another
keeps-
quarter share for NLCS. Then he's fully
Okay.
vested.
So I'm just saying, like, players, that's one thing. Figure that out with players. Okay. Team staff,
This is
put in
my-
a different category. This is
It's
not
hard,
something
man.
set in stone. It's not hard. They make plenty of fucking money. Whether they have to both come together and say, hey, like, this is how we split it. So let's put, 5% aside and we figure that out with our team
And the owners
employees.
don't trust the players. Don't trust the owners
That's
and
fair.
the teams. That's why it's on the players.
Okay.
That's why, because the
That's
players
why I'm
want it
asking.
that way. Also, the players want to be able to have the final say, and it's why it's in the CBA. Is because the players want to have the say to the because a team could say, well, I'm going to give my general manager a full share bonus for putting the team together. Well, and as players, we could be like, well, we all hate the GM. We're not giving it. He makes enough money. We don't need to give it to him. We'd rather give the full share to, the third clubhouse guy that washes my jock every night. Like, he deserves way more. The general manager's making $3 or $4 million. That guy's making $40,000. I can give him $500,000. That's 10 years of salary that he just made in one.
Life changing.
Yeah, it changes the whole trajectory. And a lot of these kids are young. I remember when we won in 05, we had kids that were in college. That were like struggling in college, and we give them, our shares weren't this big at the time, but like, you give them a half share, it's like $100,000. They're like,
And how much do you
holy
think they're
shit.
making to do a full-time job with the team? 30 grand?
25 at that time,
25?
25,
Yeah.
30 grand.
Yeah.
A full-time bat
plus
boy
tips, yeah.
doing now. Tips is where that's the other part. Man, you just keep bringing up so many thoughts
Juicy.
in my mind. But what you're saying, Scott, and this is my gripe, is teams are now going to, because staffs are ginormous, they're going to some of these analytic guys that they're putting on the field, and they're saying, I know you could probably get $150,000, $200,000 job, but do you want to come and coach in the big leagues? Do you want to come and be part of our staff in the big leagues? Well, yeah. Okay, we can only pay you $80,000. We can only pay you $90,000. It's like, well, wait, why am I going to take a $60,000 to $100,000 pay cut just to come and be a coach in the big leagues? And they're like, because we're going to make the playoffs, and you get a playoff share.
The Astros can do that every year.
Wait a minute. Why do the Astros – we just talked about the fact that this is the players' money. Why do the Astros hire people based on the fact that, the players are going to give you a share? All of a sudden, players – and I heard this in a meeting too – players are like, whoa. Why are we giving this guy a share? I know he helped us, but he has – because you get to know these guys. He took a pay cut to come to this team. He took a pay cut to come to this team and was given the assurance that you're making the playoffs. No. Like, that's not fair. And I don't know how to fix it, but you can't sit there and give away, like, hey, I want you to come over here and join this team because.
But you don't know they're going to make the playoffs. They could have a bomb season.
So
and
that
not be
is
good.
a risk.
That's
But
a
if you
risk.
look
That's
at-
like buying a stock. Like, hey,
It's like going, okay, the Astros want to hire you. And they're like, okay, we've made the playoffs. We've won however many times. Let's go. We're going to give you $60,000. But you know what the playoff share was last year in the ALCS? It was $100,000. So you're going to make way more than you're making in your job now.
Mhm.
That's
All right.
not fair.
That's interesting. So we could spend an hour on that. We
And
do
there's
have
some
guests.
really greedy dudes.